Hello, good afternoon. It is your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, and today's date is Tuesday, November 4th, 2025. The time is 4 p.m., and I am in Miami, Florida. The topic of today's lecture is Undercover Operatives Part 3, The Knuckleheads Return. And I'll remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that I do these lectures outside, so I may have to project or raise my voice from time to time to drown out the background noise. What is a knucklehead, ladies and gentlemen? For those of you who look through my project and my videos and my articles looking for threats of violence, I hate to disappoint you, but you're not going to find any. I am not a violent man. I do not encourage or support violence. In my own mind, violence is only necessary in self-defense situations. And I believe that the American legal code tends to agree with me. I sense very strongly that there are a number of persons who may know me personally or just know of me, who resent the topic of my lectures and seek to find hostile or threatening aspects of it. So you can file false reports to social media, to your local law enforcers, or whoever it is you file false reports to. Ultimately, if you are a person who is looking to pick through my project to try and find threats of violence, your plot will end in futility. I can just see it now. Smith said knucklehead. A knuckle to a head, that means a punch. He's threatening violence. I'm going to have to go to somebody about this. But the thing is, if a gang stalker sees that word knucklehead and tries to misconstrue it as a threat of violence, that just goes to show what a knucklehead he is. So I did an article yesterday about my definition of undercover operative. Now, when you think undercover operative in America, you typically think of an action-packed movie-type scenario where an officer goes undercover, he infiltrates a criminal enterprise, he exposes the whole thing, he blows up the facility, and then he rides off into the sunset with the girl, right? I mean, we've seen the Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Steven Seagal, Wesley Snipes, Patrick Swayze, Jean-Claude Van Damme movies where they play officers who infiltrate the enemy. Okay? I don't doubt that there are undercovers who are in law enforcement that experience those kinds of scenarios. But those kinds of scenarios are few and far in between. Okay, most undercover law enforcers don't encounter situations like that, where they infiltrate the enemy, they grab the computer disk with all the data on it and all the plots and schemes. They shoot their way out of the complex, and then at the end, they're heroes, right? That's a cinematic representation of what undercover work is. Okay, it's a lot more subtle. Okay, it's a lot quieter than that. Professional undercovers never have to shoot anybody. Okay, professional undercovers never have to bust out of a situation where they're a hostage or something. Okay, it's not like Rambo 3 where you got undercovers hijacking army planes and shooting up a warehouse full of arms dealers and then riding the army helicopter to the nearest military base and landing it. Okay? These are glorified representations of the work. But when I talk about undercover operatives, it's not necessarily undercover law enforcers exclusively. Okay? Quite frankly, I'm of the mindset that undercover police officers or undercover law enforcers are the most professional sort. Okay, aside from, of course, undercover Marines or undercover Naval SEALs or undercover U.S. Army Rangers or something like that. When you look at undercover military personnel and undercover police officers, you're talking about highly trained personnel. Okay, you're talking about guys that have passed a number of competency tests, first to get into the Army or the federal, state, or local law enforcement department that they're in, and then further competency tests to see if they are fit to do a job as an undercover. So when they hit the streets, they have the training, they have the insight, they have the knowledge, they have the judgment. They have typically several years of experience in the armed forces or in police work. So they're very competent, and I think that competent manifests as good undercover work. Okay? But it isn't just undercover military or law enforcers that a targeted individual will encounter, right? If you encounter a good undercover, whether he's in the military or the police, you won't know he's an undercover, typically, unless they want you to know, right? Maybe a head nod or a wink or something like that to let you know, hey, yeah, this is what I do, that type of thing. But the general public or people who are around won't typically know, hey, this is somebody who works for the state, this is somebody in plain clothes, etc., etc., etc. You're not going to know that with a professional, right? Because they have to collect data. Sometimes they have to collect data on persons who don't want their data collected, or who don't want their game plan or their occupation or their daily grind exposed. So they have to be stoic. They have to be on top of things. They have to be precise, okay, with everything, even their body movements and gestures and so forth. Now, there are undercovers that can work in non-military and non-law enforcement capacities. Okay, for example, there are bounty hunters who are not necessarily police. Okay, they're semi-law enforcement. They can do citizens arrests, but ultimately they are contractors who may or may not have law enforcement experience or military experience that go into business with a city, state, or federal government to apprehend suspects or to assist the local police, the state police, or the federal police in apprehending suspects or fugitives or wanted persons. Okay? Bounty hunters have teams of undercovers that work with them. Okay? There's also private investigators. Private investigators are people that you can pay to spy on somebody. Now, the spying that they do is state regulated, but they can follow you. They can go by your home. They can take pictures of you when you're coming out of your job. And if you go to a local bar, or you go to a local club, or you go to a local restaurant, or maybe if you go to someone's home in the area or across town for a rendezvous or any reason, they can actually film you under the law legally and give this information to a third party. Private investigators are themselves undercover operatives. How and why? Well, because they work in a semi-law enforcement capacity. Some are former detectives and so forth. And they work under state guidelines with respect to their ability to spy on people. And yes, some of them use undercover operatives to assist them in their work. You got private security firms. Okay, for example, you've got certain security firms that may hire security guards to do work in certain pub or business establishments. And these same security firms may have a team of undercover persons that do additional patrol work in plain clothes in a given area. And if they notice anything, if they see anything, like any security guard, they call local law enforcement, they document it, they do a report, and they take the information back to their supervisor. So private security firms use undercover operatives. Also, you have private businesses. You don't necessarily have to be a government building to utilize undercover presence. For example, I know for a fact that government buildings that are taxpayer funded, where government activity is taking place, it could be a courthouse, it could be a public library system. It could be just a general government center. Like, for example, you have various federal and state-run government centers in any given city, typically downtown, where official government business is conducted. Government buildings, as a matter of an extension of the security that they have inside the government building, which may be police officers, actual police officers, or contracted security guards, regardless of if it's actual officers that work security in the building or if it's security guards or both. Okay, typically it is police officers or state officers of some capacity. Even if they don't have a pistol on them in the facility, in most government buildings, the security is taken care of by actual law enforcement officers of some capacity. But there are other institutions like hospitals where they use a contracted security service. Now, in the case of a federal building or a state building or a government building, in addition to the in-house security that they also have a team of private security people in plain clothes that patrol the area. Because when you're talking about security, when you're talking about the general securement or the general patrol duty that it takes to keep something like a federal building safe or a courthouse safe, it's more than just inside the building. You need security on the outside of the building, around the perimeter, and possibly around the entire block to make sure that there's no deleterious activity going on anywhere near the courthouse. So you have the inside facility security, then you have the perimeter security, then you have the security that circles the entire block. And the outdoor security is typically plain clothes. But they have communication devices, they have connections in the security business and probably the private investigatory business and probably the bail bonds enforcer business. Okay, all of these semi-law enforcement groups communicate with each other to a very high degree, and they share information about suspicious persons and suspects and people they're looking for, that type of thing. So if you take a government building, for example, inside security, then the perimeter security, then the security that's responsible for the whole block, they're all contracted by the state to do that. Now, you have other institutions, like, for example, hospitals. They do the exact same thing. When a hospital purchases security services from a local security firm, okay, maybe you're talking Allied Universal, or you're talking Delta 5 Security, or Sig9 Security, or any number of private security contractors that you can purchase the services of. Typically, when you purchase their services, you pay them on a yearly basis, or maybe you do a 5-year contract with them, and they provide a package of services, a package of security services to you. And that package of security services includes not only in-house security, but security that is one that will secure the perimeter of your business, and security that will circle the entire block or even the whole city. Some security firms patrol the whole city, like, for example, Aventura. If you go to Aventura Mall, they have in-house security. But they also have, that same security firm also patrols the entire city of Aventura. So that if there are any strange or unusual occurrences or suspicious persons or deleterious activity, knuckleheaded activity that's going on anywhere in the city, this security firm will find it, and they'll report it to the Aventura police. The Aventura police will let the mall managers know, and they'll be able to take appropriate action based on their findings. You see? So security is a deep, deep business. It's no longer just a security guard that sits at the door and looks you up and down as you walk in, and that's all. In a post-9/11 world, security has changed, and it has contoured to the demands of the society that we live in now. So When you talk about covert operations, you're never just talking about the undercover element of actual law enforcement, or perhaps the apprehension of terrorists or terrorist suspects. Okay? Law enforcement is a very comprehensive package that is a service to the American people. And it goes deep beyond squad cars, helicopters, and the occasional undercover. There are people across this country who are both deputized and semi-deputized to do various tasks for law enforcement based on the needs of that particular department. Now, if you take my situation, for example, I do a citizen patrol in the interest of Miami-Dade County Sheriff Office. I'm not on the payroll or anything like that, but it's a hobby of mine that allows me the opportunity to give back to Miami-Dade County, but it also gives me the opportunity to watch gang stalkers a little closer, and from an angle that I wasn't previously able to watch them in. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have given you a brief summary of how security has evolved, how it's morphed, how it's changed, how interconnected it is with various law enforcement and semi-law enforcement bodies throughout the United States. Now, if you combine the national security mechanism with the intelligence mechanism, with the local police mechanism, and combine that with the semi-law enforcement mechanism, the private security mechanism, the citizen patrol mechanism, the community watch mechanism, okay, and then gang stalking, you have eyes on the ground at all times, right? This is a mechanism that could very well make America safer. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. In my estimation, the safer your country is, the better. But here's the problem that I've been having, particularly over the last year. And when I talk about undercover operatives acting like knuckleheads or zoo animals or chimpanzees, I've used words worse than that for the ones I encounter. I mean it. All right, I'm of the mindset that some of these undercover operatives in various capacities have shadows that follow them. It's not just the operating officer or the undercover operative or the undercover security person or what have you. It's not just them. There is apparently a shadow system that shadows undercover operatives. Maybe it's for their safety, but somehow these shadows, which appear in probably units of 100, okay, when an undercover officer goes from here to there, they're followed by a shadow of people that manifest in units of 100 people. And these units are there to keep the undercover, not necessarily, I'm not sure you can say they keep them safer, but they have eyes on them. You see, if you're an undercover and you work in that capacity for any public or private entity, okay, wherever you go, you're going to have at least 100 eyes on you. And those eyes, they're shadows. They're witnesses. In case anything happens to you, or you do something to somebody else, or if there's some sort of a scuffle or some sort of a disagreement or some sort of a conflict, you will always have a group of witnesses that will see it. And that's morning, noon, or night. Okay, if you're an undercover and your duty is early hours of the morning, when most people are either asleep or totally out of it, you still have units of at least 100 people on you anywhere you go. All right, this shadow that undercover units have, that undercover personnel has, sometimes they have people in them that identify suspicious people on your behalf. Okay? Sometimes those shadows that you have, those units of hundreds, somehow gravitate towards targeted individuals. Why do these shadow units gravitate towards targeted individuals? Because they're signaled to targeted individuals. And I think over time, and mind you, when they identify when these shadows identify a target and they descend upon him, it's always with some sort of knuckleheaded buffoonery that's aimed at angering him or pissing him off. Probably so he'll walk away or go somewhere else. Because why? Well, you're a targeted person. You were flagged as suspicious when we got here. We don't want you around this undercover. So what we're going to do is we're going to blow snot in the air around you to contaminate your air, piss you off, anger you, annoy you, disgust you, and make you leave. So that's what happens. And whoever that shadow guy was, he disappears, and now the undercover is, quote, safe from the presence of the targeted individual. Okay? Now, these shadows that follow these undercovers, they're made up of people who practice gang stalking. They're made up of people who enjoy disenfranchising, attacking, or annoying persons who have been signaled as suspicious. And that's all somebody has to do, is signal you as suspicious for one of these Joe Blow jokers to approach you and act like a total fool around you in order to get you to get up and leave. You know, I see this a lot where I'll be in a public place. It could be a bus, it could be a mall, it could be a restaurant, it could be any type of establishment. And a stalker will approach me and do something disgusting around me. Maybe they just stand near me as close as possible and start breathing heavily in my face, or belching in the air, or crowding my space, or getting up as close to me as they possibly can, and they're flinging boogers in the air, that kind of thing. The kind of stuff you'd see a 5-year-old do during a tantrum. These grown men who are either undercovers themselves or shadows of undercovers are signaled to a targeted individual's location, and they start doing that stuff because they want to be where you are without your presence. So they do something to gross you out, so you leave and they can have whatever space you were just in. You see? And this is obviously synchronized activity. And no, the American people didn't come up with this on their own. Okay? There are a lot of Americans that can't tie their shoe without reading the instruction manual. You mean to tell me that these same Americans were able to put together an interstate subversion mechanism on their own? No. Of course they have governmental help. And that's what gang stalking is a government-sanctioned surveillance, containment, harassment, and disruption mechanism that puts one segment of the population as stalkers against another segment of the population as targeted individuals. So ultimately, what it comes down to is, what are you going to do as a target? Because the stalkers, they're not going to stop. They have too much fun doing what they do. I mean, look at the undercover operatives, for example, ladies and gentlemen. And we're not talking about simply the law enforcers or the police ones. We're not just talking about the military ones. We're talking about any undercover operative at all. Some undercover operatives that work for companies, like banks and so forth, a lot of their undercover operatives are simply data gatherers. They're not trained to kill people or fight in close quarters or apprehend suspects. They're just watching and collecting data within the confines of the law as to what an undercover operative can do with respect to spying on people. So, when you talk about the kinds of undercover operatives that I refer to as primates, okay, these are the ones that use their authority as wards of the state to cause harm, mischief, or calamity to people. Now you may ask yourself, Smith, why would a ward of the state who works in a law enforcement or semi-law enforcement capacity, who's undercover, who has a job to do or has a mission, even if that mission is just to watch or observe, why would such a person approach a random stranger in an attempt to cause harm, discomfort, or calamity to him at all? The answer to your question, ladies and gentlemen, is social credit. Okay? Social credit is what gang stalkers are after. That is why they pick up their self every morning out of bed, wash their butts, gargle some mouthwash, put their clothes on, eat their bacon and egg breakfast with milk, hop into their car or on the city bus, and go out into the world every day. That's why gang stalkers do that. That's why they ready themselves on a daily basis and go out into the world. It's for social credit. Anybody who practices gang stalking in any of its capacities is after social credit. Okay? What is social credit? Social credit is the equivalent of what a person might refer to as clout. Okay? Gang stalking is an entity and an enterprise. It is not just a loose confederation of people signaling each other all over the place. There's order to it. There's a system to it. There's protocols to it. Okay? There are internal checks and balances to it. Okay? I've described clandestine gang stalking as a nation inside of this nation. It is a separate, segregated nation of people of all demographic backgrounds that participate in a silent, coded communication mechanism which allows them to identify suspicious persons or simply people they don't want around and descend upon them with a system of harassment and attack protocols that is aimed at removing somebody's presence from you. If you do a good job in your role as a gang stalker, other gang stalkers will see it. Other gang stalkers will remember it. Other gang stalkers will absorb those signals and understand them and know that you were the one that did it correctly. So if ever they need somebody that they need to use a signaling method with, All right? They know to go to you. Okay? It's an exercise in building clout for yourself. Okay? Not everybody is good at everything. Not everybody is special at something. Okay? There was an old poster that my 8th grade basketball coach used to hang up on his wall. Okay? It said everybody has a little Michael Jordan in them. And what that means is that everyone has something that they do exceptionally well. Everybody is capable of doing great things to a degree, regardless of who you are, and regardless of your background, and regardless of this or that. So it's basically a way of saying that everyone has the capacity to be great at something. The way Jordan himself was great at professional basketball. Okay? I had a 10th grade basketball coach who used to repeat that line to us. Because he himself was a tremendous athlete in his day, just like my 8th grade coach was. Okay? In their respective sports. And they wanted everyone on the team to know each one of you has special skills and ability, maximize them. Right? Gang stalkers have the opportunity to maximize their abilities too. What abilities do they have? Well, they're good at contaminating people's air. They're good at breaking into people's homes. Let's see, what else are they really good at? They're good at running people over with vehicles. They're good at infiltrating people's workplaces and causing a ruckus. They're good at filing false police reports on people. They're good at hacking people's computers and spying on them in ways that'll help them pester them even worse. They're good at degradation of interpersonal relationships. They're good at hacking people's phones and tablets. Gang stalkers are also good at approaching random people and angering them very, very quickly. They're good at impersonation. They're good at vandalism and the destruction of property. All right. They're good at manipulation. They're good at sabotage. They're good at workplace mobbing. They're good at deception. They're good at child harassment. Gang stalkers have a standard of greatness as well, ladies and gentlemen. That standard of greatness is not exactly the standard of greatness that most people have for themselves. Like, for example, if you are a college quarterback, for example, you have a standard of greatness that you have the opportunity to pursue. Okay? Let's say you know you're going to play anywhere from 16 to 20 games that season based on how well you do, right? Well, What's your standard of greatness? Maybe if I pass for 30 touchdowns this year, maybe 1,400 yards rushing, at a completion percentage of 52%. Well, that's your standard of greatness. What if you're a business executive? You have a standard of greatness too. What's your standard of greatness as a business executive? Well, you could say something. Let's say you're the chief sales official for a Fortune 500 company. You might say, well, my standard of greatness is a 16% increase in sales this quarter, a 8% reduction in employee turnover, and a $3.50 per share increase in our stock value. That's your standard of greatness as a business professional. What if you're a politician? Let's say you're the governor of a state. What's your standard of greatness? Well, if you're a governor of a state, your standard of greatness might be, well, I'd like to see a 17-point reduction in violent crime in my state this year. I'd like to see a $450 million reduction in total taxes paid by the citizens. And I would like to see the renovation of every public high school in problem areas. That could be your standard of greatness as a governor. You see, regardless of what you do for a living, you have a standard of greatness by which you can pursue your interests. What is a gang stalker's standard of greatness? Well, in order to be a really good gang stalker, you have to cause as many calamities as possible in the lives of people in as short a period of time as you possibly can. You know, as a gang stalker, if I can send at least 10 people to the hospital this week with bacterial symptoms from disease, from food contamination, courtesy of me, then I would be a very, very happy man. As a stalker, if I could find a way to make 18 people in various places fall down a flight of stairs this month, not because I pushed them, but maybe because I just walked up to them just awkwardly enough to throw off their equilibrium and make them lose their balance. Or if I, as a gang stalker, can cause anywhere from 60 to 100 instigations and altercations in which the police are called to break up the fight. Well, that's my standard of greatness as a gang stalker. Now, we'll do undercovers and liaisons. What's an if you're talking about an undercover operative, again, we aren't talking about the professional kind. We're talking about the kind that uses gang stalking to piss people off and pester people. If I'm an undercover operative and I use gang stalking, what's my standard of greatness? Well, the first thing on his list is, how many people was I able to shoot this month? And I'll say that, ladies and gentlemen, because listen, ladies and gentlemen, all I can do as a political commentator is draw from my own experiences, from the experiences of people around me, from historical matters, from news and current events, from political matters, and from various trends that I see that help identify what's going to happen in the future. That's all you really got. Okay, that and your gut instinct, which may or may not be right ever. But based on the undercovers that I've come across, ladies and gentlemen, that seems to be their ultimate goal. Okay, let's find enough of a reason to shoot this person. Okay, it don't have to be a threat of violence to the undercover operative. There don't have to be a threat to the undercover operative's life. There doesn't have to be an immediate or dangerous scenario that the undercover operative has to shoot his way out of. It doesn't have to be that. All they need is enough of a narrative. Okay? Here's what the undercovers were doing with me, because I'm no different. Anytime undercover operatives are put on a subject, they want that situation to end in the subject's murder. They don't know. Listen here, ladies and gentlemen. Listen here. Okay, if they're not given clear instructions to make an arrest or clear instructions to do anything but monitor the person and take mental notes, there are a lot of undercover operatives that take those instructions and go, well, it's simple enough, but it's also boring. I became an undercover operative because I like action. And not just any action, I like fast, nasty action. Kind of like Teddy Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt. If I'm not mistaken, she did a quote where she said, America is all about speed. Hot, fast, nasty speed. Right? Well, undercover operatives are about hot, fast, nasty action. And how do they get that action? They can't just run up to somebody and shoot them whenever they want. Why? Because their knuckleheaded asses will go to jail for that. So if they want to attain that hot, fast, nasty action that they're after, they have to create a narrative. They have to create a scapegoat. They have to create an impetus. They have to create a reason. I don't want to just watch this dude. I want to do some action with this dude. I'm not just any undercover operative, I'm a super operative. All those other operatives that were just watching this guy, they're operatives. But me, I'm a super operative. I want to do more than just watch him. I want him to remember me forever. Right? That's how they think too. And you know what they're saying to themselves? We're going to try and use this video as a reason. Right? Some operatives force contact with you. They'll cause a collision in a grocery store, or they'll bump into you at a Walmart physically. Or maybe you're walking to your car and they'll walk up behind you and trip over your foot or something. They like some undercover operatives like to force contact with the person they're watching or the person they're signaled to, so they can force contact and make it look like they're being attacked by the person that they're being assigned to watch. That complicates their relationship with the person, and if they ever come in contact with that person again, they could come in contact with that person with the idea of possibly harming that person with deadly force. Or if not harming that person with deadly force, at the very least shooting them in one of their limbs. I'm a sovereign United States citizen, and I invoke my First Amendment right to the United States Constitution to say what I'm saying right now. Now, for all I know, I got an undercover operative pointing a sniper rifle at me right now. Not because I'm a threat, not because I have hostages, not because I'm in possession of an explosive, not because I plan to be, not because I'm plotting something, but simply because they don't think there'll be any recourse. It'll be fun pointing a sniper rifle at a guy who calls himself a targeted individual. I mean, let's be real. What sniper in Miami-Dade County, what undercover in Miami-Dade County, what stalker in Miami-Dade County, what knucklehead in Miami-Dade County wouldn't want to be the guy that was able to harm Smith? Well, you know what? You all have been checkmated. That's why you can't harm me. As a matter of fact, I checkmated you 10 years ago when I started this program. You understand? So at this point, all you can do is watch me, and I don't mind that. Just be professional about it. And you liaisons, your standard of greatness is the mobilization of as many half-wits as possible. Okay? Liaisons like blind obedience. They don't like people that ask a lot of questions. They don't like people who want to know too much. They like people who take the signal and run with it. All right, if you can get 100,000 blind, obedient, useful idiots to do what you tell them to do, you've reached your standard of greatness as a liaison. What's my standard of greatness? My standard of greatness as a political commentator is simply to spread the word about gang stalking. That's it. The website that I run, the business that I run, is a public service. It's free to the public. So anybody can listen, anybody can consume, anybody can record, anybody can duplicate my material. It's free to the public. You can donate if you want to. If you don't, you're still welcome to my material. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, clandestine gang stalking is a one-of-a-kind problem, and it requires a one-of-a-kind solution. And that one-of-a-kind solution is transparency in government operations. So, and I know what the national security apparatus would say to that. They'd say, Smith, don't you realize that the reason we have covert operations is because sometimes the people that we consider to be the bad guys are watching, and we don't want to let them know what we're going to do before we do it so they can prepare. I understand that, but here's what I'm trying to figure out in spite of that. I'm trying to figure out why it is that all of this sophisticated personnel mobilization and security apparatus and technologically advanced surveillance techniques and so forth are being used on a person who has no criminal record, no terrorist ties, no capacity to commit any type of a massive attack. What good does it do? Because see, it's not just the surveillance. I don't mind the surveillance. You can surveil me till the cows come home. What ticks me off, and the reason I called this program Undercover Knuckleheads, is because some of the people that are attached to what you do approach me with such annoyance and hostility. Okay, you ever seen a football game where your team is down by a point and it's in the fourth quarter? Time is draining. The home team is anxious. There's a lot at stake in this game. You're at your own 40-yard line, and you got the last play of the game. Rather than try a Hail Mary pass down the field, the coach decides to try a 60-yard field goal. There's a very low chance of that field goal going through the goalposts, but if you try that field goal and the field goal is successful, you win the game by 2 points. So, what do? You take the field goal even though there's a low chance of it succeeding, because you know that a field goal from 60 yards out is easier to make a play, a successful play on, than doing a 60-yard Hail Mary the last second of the game, because defenses tend to be more aggressive in the final seconds of a game when it's close. So you get the team's best kicker, You spot up the play. He kicks the ball 60 yards down the field, and he scores it. Game over. You win. That kicker is now the hero of the game. He's the hero of the college, and he's the hero of the town, at least until next game. If they lose the next game, no more hero. Now you got to prove yourself again. But that's how I feel about a lot of the undercovers that come my way. I mean, sometimes I just want to spot up and just kick them 60 yards away. Just like that football player did. And I think that pretty much sums the matter up, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for listening.